Hello and welcome to the Opening Bell, the Boxing News podcast. This week I'm joined by Danny Flexen. Tris Dixon, the editor, is out somewhere. Is he Mallorca, is it?
Marbella, isn't it?
Is it Marbella?
No cars before Marbs, I think he was heard to say, is he?
Right, okay, yeah. Well, he's somewhere with the sun shining, no doubt. Danny, I'm sorry to drag you away to do this. I know you're busy at the moment. You're working heavily on the bookazine that we're producing, Total Fight Training. How's it all going? Tell us a little bit about
that. Yeah, it's going well. It's completely stressing me out, but I'm not the important one here. The product is. Basically it's a complete training manual and guide for fitness enthusiasts, trainers and aspiring fighters. So you've got elements of training, elements of nutrition, boxing or striking, technique, pretty much everything you could need.
Cool. And that's out, the end of September, is it?
I think it's the middle of September the 15th, I believe.
Right.
I think that's TBC, but we're taking pre-orders at the moment through the Boxing News shop.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, we've got a lot to get through. It was a busy weekend, wasn't it? We'll touch on some stuff that you watched on Friday night ESPN in a bit, but let's start with the events in Cardiff. Dramatic night for all involved, even us lot watching it on television. Nathan Cleverly, he was thoroughly beaten in the end. It was a comprehensive and impressive performance from Kovalev. There was a lot of talk afterwards on Twitter that it was obvious that Cleverly was going to lose. Is that another one of those things where hindsight is 20/20? Do you think, Danny?
To an extent. I mean, to be fair, Kovalev was the pre-fight favourite, so maybe I wouldn't say it was obvious that he was going to win, but he was favoured by the bookmakers. So that tells you something. I didn't actually watching the fight. I didn't think Kovalev was amazing. I wasn't struck by an incredible talent. I didn't think, wow, this is the next big thing. In the same way as when I watched Golovkin destroy Macklin. What I would say is his power is phenomenal. And there's no question that was impressive. But the way he set up his shots, the way he came forward, I wasn't bowled over like Cleverly, unfortunately, was. But I thought Cleverly didn't look himself, to be honest. I thought from the ring walk through to the end of the first round when he was in the corner, he just didn't seem his normal, energetic, positive self.
Yeah, it wasn't. But you funny you mentioned. I was just thinking about the Gennady Golovkin performance against Matthew Macklin. It was obvious in the first 30 seconds there that Macklin had bitten off far more than he could chew, wasn't it? It wasn't quite the same with this. I mean, Cleverly, as you say, he wasn't controlling things, but at the end of the first two rounds, it wouldn't have been an outrageous suggestion to say he could still go on and win the fight. He unravelled in the third, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he seemed so nervous from the start. He was moving around without purpose a lot of the time. There's so much mobility, a lot more than usual. He'd obviously been told to keep on his toes because of Kovalev's dangerous power. But yeah, I mean, he was flicking out jabs, he was throwing shots he didn't need to, and he looked nervous on the way to the ring in the first place. At the end of the first round, he was being toweled down or fanned down in his corner, and he was sweating profusely, and it had only been one round, and it just seemed then that he was somewhere else mentally.
What do you think the problem was?
It's hard to say. I mean, he seems to have taken the defeat pretty well, maybe too well, you'd say. I know he's talked about maybe packing it in, he needs to consider his future. But just seeing him and speaking to him after the fight, he seemed to be okay with losing, and that's a bit of a worry. I don't know if he's lost his love for the game a little bit. I don't want to speculate too much. He's always seemed to be really into it. He never recovered from the first big shot Kovalev landed. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's talk. It's predictable. I mean, I think even before Cleverly had lost the fight, there's been some criticism of his father being the trainer. Is that something that you would advise for him to look around for another trainer, or is that always a too easy a so-called solution in these sort of situations?
It was inevitable that questions would be asked. If questions were asked when Cleverly was successful about his dad, they were going to be asked even more so. Now he's lost for the first time. It's very difficult to say. I mean, yeah, Vince isn't the most technically gifted of trainers. There's no doubt about that. He hasn't got the length of experience that some of the other guys out there have. He's never taken anyone apart from his son to the top. But the work he's done with his son was pretty impressive. I don't think Cleverly, as a 20-year-old, or even when he left Enzo Calzaghe's camp, was a can't-miss prospect.
Yeah.
So I think, Vince, along with Alan Davis, who's an integral part of the team, have done really well to take Cleverly as far as they have. I also think having Dean Powell in the corner, compensates a lot for the lack of experience that Vince has, because Dean's been around, done virtually every job in the game, so Dean really knows his stuff. Between the three of them, they couldn't carry him to victory, and sometimes it isn't the team's fault. Sometimes the fighter's just either not good enough to beat the guy in front of him, or he does the wrong thing, he doesn't implement the game plan he's been told to.
If he decides to carry on, unless, let's remember it's his first setback, he's 26 years old, which is still young, still very, very young in boxing, particularly at the top level. What would be the ideal route back for him? I know there's people afterwards talking about going back down to European level. Is that the way forward for Nathan at this point?
I think he needs a couple of rebuilding fights, but I don't think he needs to regress too far. I think you can blunt your competitive edge as a fighter if you fight people that are several leagues below you. And he has beaten people like Tony Bellew, who's soon to challenge for another world title, who's won a final eliminator. He's beaten Karo Murat, who's again soon to challenge for a light heavyweight world title. So he's not, it's not like he's suddenly not world class because he lost to Kovalev. Sometimes stars make fights, and Cleverly, when he's been hit on the chin in the past, has wobbled, and we knew there was a vulnerability there, and he knew there was vulnerability there, which is why he tried to move for the first few rounds. Kovalev's a massive puncher. We've seen him knock out Campillo and do to him what no one's done before. So I don't think you can judge just on this one fight. Yeah, I mean, go back maybe one level, European or fringe world class for a couple of fights. But, it's just like Amir Khan getting knocked out by first Prescott and then Garcia. He's not been diminished as a fighter, he just has vulnerabilities.
Yeah, it's a good way of putting it. And if we look at Kovalev, the victor, I mean, you say you were not overly impressed with him. I completely understand with what you were saying in terms of he didn't have the air of a Golovkin about him. But can he make a case for being the best light heavyweight in the world?
No, not yet.
Right.
I think with Hopkins still around, I think Hopkins has got that mantle. I know he only beat Tavoris Cloud at the weight, but he's been in there with Chad Dawson, lasted the distance, wasn't the best fight in the world, and he came up short. But I think Hopkins is kind of the incumbent in that position. I don't think beating Cleverly, even in such an impressive manner, gets someone up there, because Cleverly wasn't considered the best of the 4 world champions. I think Hopkins is still number one because of what he's achieved at the weight, and also because of what he's achieved at other weights.
Would you pick Hopkins over Kovalev?
It's a tough one. I mean, I think we can both agree that Hopkins will want no part of someone like Kovalev.
Yeah.
He's not a massive star, and he doesn't bring much to the table in that sense. And on the flip side, he's quite dangerous. But I think there's a certain rawness about Kovalev. I think in a couple of years that might be ironed out. But I think this is a good stage to get him. And someone like Hopkins, who's crafty, moderates his punch output, holds and jostles people around, he might be just the sort of person to beat Kovalev.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But like you say, it's a fight that's probably not going to happen unless Kovalev does something sensational and increases box office potential dramatically. Okay, look, quickly moving on to the undercard, because it was a brilliant undercard, wasn't it? It really, really did build up nicely to the main event. Chief support, Gary Buckland and Stephen Smith. Stephen Smith looked wonderful, didn't he?
Yeah, Stephen Smith looked great. I mean, was outboxing him. Very, very calm corner work as well from Joe Gallagher. I was quite impressed with that. Just told him what he needs to do, when he needed to step it up. Didn't let him go too fast too soon. Buckland was doing all the right things. I think on the commentary they were accusing him of going forward in straight lines, but I thought he was cutting the ring off very well. But yeah, in cutting the ring off very well, he walked into the finishing shot as well.
Yeah, it reminded me, I know it was a different kind of shot, but the effect that it had, it reminded me of Manny Pacquiao face down on the canvas against Juan Manuel Marquez, and Buckland he was out cold, wasn't he?
It reminded me of another Marquez fight. It reminded me of Marquez against Juan Diaz.
Oh, the ninth round.
The uppercut on the back foot.
Yeah.
It was concussive. It was horrible. Obviously, we didn't know how badly Buckland was injured for quite some time, and Smith had to curtail his celebrations pretty quickly. But yeah, I mean, we're all glad, obviously, that he recovered. But great, performance, eye-catching performance.
And what about the Smith family as a whole? Of course, they've got Paul Smith up at super middleweight, champion of Britain. Liam challenging soon, and also, Callum Smith is on his way up. It's a fantastic story for the sport, though, isn't it? That's the Smith family.
Yeah, well, they could be the first set of 3 brothers to hold British titles simultaneously, and could even increase that to 4 if Callum kind of gets a move on. He's been matched relatively tough already. They've obviously got high hopes for him.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a case that Callum could turn out to be the best of the lot as a pro.
Also on the bill, Enzo Macronelli, written off by many, including myself, a long time ago. What did you make of that?
I'd like to say I'm happy for him, but I can't, to be honest, because I think this could end up being one of the worst things that can happen to him, because he's won in quite a tight, grueling fight at a certain level, and I think this will encourage him to step up a level and to carry on a bit longer. I think Enzo's had such a lot of hard fights in his career, some knockouts that have just been horrible to watch. And now, because he's had a decent win for the first time in a while, it will encourage him to go further, I think. And I don't think that's for the best for him, you know, for his health and for his future.
Okay, I mean, there's been talk often about an Enzo Nathan Cleverly fight, which kind of used to make me shudder, really, to be honest, with the way that Enzo's career has been going. But he has been given that kickstart, but is it a feasible matchup now, Macronelli against Cleverly, given that Cleverly's lost and Macronelli has got some kind of drawing power again?
It's feasible from a promotional standpoint, certainly. Yeah. I wouldn't like to see it. I think it's the worst type of opponent for Macronelli, because it's someone who hits relatively hard but maybe not hard enough to knock him out. So we're looking at, if it is the type of fight I would expect, it could turn out to be a prolonged beating, which is the last thing he needs at this stage of his career. You know, Cleverly hits respectably and hits often, and that's the problem, isn't it? Ovill McKenzie stood right in front of Macronelli for a lot of the fight, and they traded bombs. Cleverly's not going to fight like that. He's going to be on his toes, he's going to try and outbox him, and he's going to throw a lot of shots, and that could spell trouble. You know, Enzo will take heart from the fact that Cleverly's just been chinned by Kovalev, and he's a big puncher himself, Enzo is. But I'm not sure he's quite the puncher he was at cruiserweight down at light heavy. Yeah,
irrespective of what's happened in the past to Enzo and what may happen in the future, was this the best fight in Britain this year so far?
That's a tough one. Off the top of my head, no, I would say no, actually. I'm just trying to think of other ones that I think are better. Obviously, the recent fight with Derry Matthews and Tommy Coyle was pretty good, if a little one-sided. Before that, was it Matthews-Crawler rematch? Was that this year?
Yeah.
Reese-Crawler was certainly this year. And that was a cracking fight.
Yeah.
So I'd say they were all a bit better, because this was a really grueling kind of punch-trading fight. There wasn't a lot of movement. There wasn't a lot of variety on show. So I think, you know, other fights are a bit more rounded than this one.
Yeah, and I did say forget the past, but I think what also made this exciting, almost uncomfortably exciting, was what we knew about Enzo, and you're almost waiting for him to. You're kind of watching through your fingers, aren't you, when Enzo fights?
Yeah, well, I think with both of them, I think all the way through, you just thought one big shot could unhinge either man. You know, because they took a lot, and you thought the next one's going to be the one. And eventually it happened, but it could easily have been the other way around. I think. I think Enzo did look a fair bit bigger than McKenzie on the night, and that might have had an impact, especially with holding and bullying around strength games and things like that.
Yeah. Well, it was a good build, but the highlight, certainly from a British perspective that night, came a few hours later over in Atlantic City. Darren Barker. Now, we spoke about a good boxing story with the Smiths. This Darren Barker story is even more feel-good than that, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, of course, obviously his late brother passed away, a very promising fighter himself, and Darren dedicated his career to him from then on. He's had a lot of problems himself, Darren, with injuries and setbacks. Obviously lost to Sergio Martinez famously, and put forward a great effort though. And he considered quitting himself with those persistent injuries, especially to his hip. And they've modified his training to help with that. But yeah, I mean, finally vindicated for all the hard work and all the sacrifices he's made. He's now got a platform where he can provide for his family, he can have a couple of really big money fights, and then maybe retire. I know Johnny Nelson on Sky was hitting it might be time for Barker to retire now, because he's finally achieved his goal, and it might be hard to get motivated now. But I think there's still a few worlds left to conquer.
Yeah, no, I don't think for 1 second he'd retire now. He's never been a secret that as well as wanting to dedicate it to his brother, he wants some financial security for his family moving forward. He wants to be sipping margaritas on the beach and this, that and the other. He wants that perfect lifestyle. This fight alone will not have beefed up his wallet to that extent, will it? No. I think Felix Sturm is looking likely for December. But then it does open the door to what fight fans have wanted for a while now, and that's a kind of a round robin of the top British middleweights, isn't it? How do you think that's likely in the future?
Maybe not all of them. I think there's certain promotional difficulties that would make, say, Barker against Martin Murray quite difficult. Yeah. They're on different TV channels. Although Murray's people put out a press release kind of challenging Barker this morning, I can't see that happening. I think from Barker's point of view, he beats Sturm in December, and then he fights Macklin in a really big money fight in this country. And if that comes off, maybe he could consider retiring after that, because he has had his share of hard fights and injury setbacks. But him against Macklin would be huge in this country. You know, possibly even pay-per-view with a world title on the line. If Macklin gets a comeback win under his belt. Stay well away from Golovkin, Darren. We care about you. You watched Golovkin's last fight, and I could tell that you didn't want any part of him either. So no one does. Don't feel embarrassed.
No, it's true. But I mean, going back to the fight, he started very, very fast, and then in that 6th round when he got dropped, I was certain the fight was over at that point. Or if he got up, the fight would quickly be over. You don't see... It's not very often you see a boxer recover from a body shot like that, is it?
Yeah, I mean, even when he got up, you just thought, nah, there's no way you're going to the end of this round, then through the next round. But obviously it was near the end of the round, and yeah, he fought back bravely. Didn't really seem... Thing is as well, Gill didn't seem to target the body particularly after he knocked him down. You know, he sporadically did so for the rest of the fight, but he never made a concerted effort in that area, and that was a surprise.
Yeah. Did you have any qualms with the scores?
No, not at all. Not sure what all three were. I'd have to have another look. But, I mean, I had Barker a point up at the end.
Yeah, I did.
I think on Twitter a lot of people had him slightly further ahead.
Yeah.
William Hill, sponsors of the...
Okay. Well, you came in on Monday and you were talking about the best fight that you'd seen over the course of the weekend. It wasn't Barker Gill. It wasn't Macronelli, Mackenzie. What was it?
It was Adrian Granados against Mark Salsa. those two superstars in Chicago outdoors on ESPN's Friday Night Fights. The headline act was Andre Fonfara stopping Gabriel Campillo in an IBF final eliminator, which was a decent fight. And there was a rematch on the card as well between Mike Mollo and Spilka, the Pole, a big Polish heavyweight, which was very, very good fun. But yeah, Granados Salsa was just amazing. Granados came out boxing at the start, pretty good, you know, on his toes, but decent exchanges. Salsa would just wait. There was one point in the fight where Salsa just waited with his back to the corner, and Granados backed off trying to lure him in, and Salsa just stayed in the corner, didn't move, and just waited. And then eventually Granados had gone all the way over to the other side of the ring, came back to the corner, and they started trading again. And Teddy Atlas was saying on commentary, there's no point in wasting energy moving. He knows the only place he's going to land on Granados, who's the better boxer, is in that corner, so he might as well just stay there and wait for him. And it was like that. It was like phone booth warfare all the way through. They both went down. Granados eventually outlasted him, but it was dicey for a while. It looked like he was going to get stopped.
Well, I still haven't seen this fight. How does it compare? I mean, obviously, it hasn't got the name value of some of the other Fight of the Year contenders we've had, but with like Bradley, Provodnikov and what have you, which for me is leading the way. But you've got the Alvarado-Rios rematch as well up there. How does it compare? Does it fit into those? Would it make your top 5 fights of the year? Would it be number 1 in your fights of the year so far? Internationally,
it'd make my top 5. It wouldn't make my number 1. I think for a number 1 fight of the year, it has to be action-packed all the way through, but it has to be a certain level of artistic merit as well.
Yeah.
And I think Granados boxed really well for the first 2 rounds, but after that, it was a slugfest, pure and simple. And also, I think when a fight only lasts, I'm not sure if it's 6-7 rounds, something like that. When a fight only lasts that long, the action's really condensed, which makes it feel more explosive and dynamic. But on the negative side, it means that quality, that level of excitement's not enduring for 12 rounds, whereas Bradley Provodnikov did.
Yeah.
So top 5 but not number 1.
Right, okay. But it's been... I mean, Tristan and I were talking about this a few weeks ago, but it's been an incredible year for action, hasn't it? Particularly if you look back to last year and you were kind of struggling for a fight of the year, and then Marquez Pacquiao came along. It really has been a good year for the sport, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I'd like to think the promoters were making these fights believing that they would be that special, and that's why they're making them. I'm not sure if that's true. I'm not sure anyone expected Bradley Provodnikov to be as amazing as it was, except the guy who previewed it in Boxing News might have said something along those lines, just from memory. But yeah, I mean, generally, I think the more promoters make the fights the fans want to see, the more chances there are of these exciting fights. Pacquiao, Brandon Rios, I think everyone expects Pacquiao to win, but it should be an exciting fight. Provodnikov against Mike Alvarado, ditto. Even Mayweather-Alvarez, if Alvarez is on him for a lot of the fight instead of fighting in spurts, could make Mayweather fight a lot harder than he has in a while, could maybe even more so than Cotto did. So, I think there's still much to look forward to. Hey Fury in this country is going to be quite exciting while it lasts, I think, as well.
Yeah. What about Froch Groves? Do you think that's got the makings of a classic?
I think so, given the styles of both fighters, yeah. I mean, my only worry is that Froch might be too dominant, but I think Froch can also be a slow starter. I think Groves doesn't have that problem. So I think if it's kind of a fight of two halves, Groves starts better, a bit faster, gets worn down, they both come into it, a real brawl in the second half. I think that'd be really good.
Okay, just before we move on to looking ahead to this weekend's action, the guy I missed out actually from the Atlantic City Bill, who impressed as well, was little Kiko Martinez, who got his world title. Another nice story that Kiko got the world title. He was an underdog, so sometimes it's nice to see that happen. What does that do for the likes of Carl Frampton, who's obviously already beaten Kiko, and Scott Quigg's prospects are saying they're amongst the best in the world?
Well, yeah, we were talking about this earlier in the week, and one of the strange things is that Rendell Munro, who's just come back from retirement, has now beaten 2 reigning World Super Bantamweight champions.
Right, okay, that's true,
in Victor Terrazas and Kiko Martinez. So he must be devastated, you can imagine. He's fighting in Leicester in front of 1,000 people, getting his payday, which is fine, but, he must be thinking, God, my name should be up there in lights in Atlantic City or Las Vegas. So he must be gutted. Frampton's probably a bit gutted, but he's still got his career in front of him. He's still got a good position with the governing body, so he knows his time will come. He's more likely to get there as a mandatory challenger, whereas Martinez was a voluntary because, Romero's people obviously thought he was finished. It's great for Martinez, though. I mean, he looks about 40, but he's still in his 20s, I believe.
Yeah, he is, yeah.
It's just crazy.
I was surprised. I was surprised when he fought Frampton. I think I was doing the preview for that, and I was shocked when I had to double check his age. I think he's like
asking for his passport. But he against Frampton in the early stages, he looked like he'd improved, and he's been training with Pablo Sarmiento, hasn't he? Gabriel Martinez, his trainer.
Yeah.
Is it Gabriel Martinez? I got that wrong. Sergio
Martinez, yeah.
I know he is really.
Yeah.
And he's looked better since. There's a bit more guile to his work. He's working, instead of working in spurts, he's working for every minute of every round. And he deserves it. It's nice to see.
Yeah, no, it is. It is absolutely. But it shows you that it can work if you kind of do uproot and you just go and you just start again. Doesn't always work. No. Doesn't always work, but it's worked on this occasion. Okay, if we move forward to this weekend, the biggest fight of the weekend is Abner Mares against Johnny Gonzalez. 2 exciting fighters. Mares he's making a case to be up there pound for pound. Have you been impressed with the way Mares has gone about his business so far in his career?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, he doesn't get the attention maybe his achievements deserve. He's got a chance at the weekend to be a 3-weight world champion, which, isn't, even in the days of spurious titles, isn't that easy to achieve. He's usually in exciting fights, and he's usually the one making the fight as well. He's aggressive, he's got a good work rate, but they're allied to good skills as well.
Yeah.
So, I'm impressed with him. I think Gonzalez is faded, and, but I think he'll hang in there. He's very brave, Johnny Gonzalez, so it should be a good fight.
Yeah, it should be. A big fan of Johnny Gonzalez as well. What he's achieved throughout his career, he's kind of had a bit of a roller coaster career, but he's riding a high at the moment. Right, kind of running out of time, but there's a heavyweight fight, quite an interesting fight. Tony Thompson against Kubrat Pulev that's taking place. It's an IBF eliminator. Now, if we go back a year, you wouldn't have thought that Tony Thompson would be putting himself in a position to have a third fight with Vladimir Klitschko, would you? And it's only last month, we can still say, that he had his last fight. So Thompson really, really keeping busy. Do you think he's got a chance? Well, of course he's got a chance. Is he a realistic? Is he worth putting any cash on Thompson scoring a third upset in a row?
If the odds are good, have we seen Pulev hit on the chin by a real good puncher yet? I'm not sure we have. Have we seen him tested by a world-class fighter, southpaw as well? Not sure we have. I'm not picking him to win, Thompson, but if he's got good odds, it's worth a punt. It's always worth a punt. It's a tough fight for him because Pulev's physically strong, durable, and has really, really good technical skills as well. David Price, there might have been a sense with Thompson that from their first fight he was a bit fragile, and that encouraged Thompson to be a bit more come forward. I'm not sure he'll be as gung-ho against Pulev.
No, and he as you say, he certainly wasn't remotely gung-ho, was he, in that first fight?
Not at all.
Only when that shot landed, and that really did reinvigorate his whole career, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, he's beaten a touted prospect twice in a row, so he deserves this opportunity. I think I'm a bit disappointed he's gone straight into the Pulev fight. He's obviously striking while the iron's hot, but I think he could have hung on and maybe got a bigger payday in somewhere else, either on his home turf or against some a bigger name. I think Pulev's not the biggest name yet. I think if Thompson beats Pulev, he'll be in a great position. But it's a big risk to take, isn't it?
I think it is a big risk, but I mean, I can't imagine. I think Deontay Wilder would stay away from him in America. We got Mitchell and Areola seem to be going down that route towards Wilder. I think if he loses this in Germany, he's still a live opponent, and perhaps he might get more fights from it. Whereas at the moment, after he's beaten David Price, I think these unbeaten fighters might be thinking, hang on, we don't want to risk it with Tony the Tiger.
Just feels like he hasn't been rewarded for shocking
the
world.
Yeah.
I thought that after the first Price fight when he had to fight the rematch, I thought, well, he's not really been rewarded for upsetting Price by having to fight him again in Britain again.
Yeah.
And now he's done it twice, which is amazing. No one predicted it. He's now having to go to someone else's backyard to fight another prospect. And is that the role he wants for himself now? I guess as long as he's getting paid well, he's happy with it.
I suspect so, and I suspect he is getting paid fairly well for this fight. And what is he, 41? He probably didn't. He seemed to be talking himself into retirement before the David Price fight. Now he's kind of thinking, right, every opportunity I get, I'm gonna take these fights. He's probably, as I said, being paid quite well. But I think it's an interesting one for him. But we'll have to see if he can continue that good form that he showed against Price. I think it's a more difficult fight for him.
Yeah, I think I'd like him to do it. It'd be a nice story.
Yeah, it would. I think the other thing as well that you have to think about is because the second loss to Vladimir Klitschko is so fresh, nobody really wants to see a third fight with Vladimir Klitschko, and that would be the ultimate reward for him, wouldn't it?
True, yeah. Yeah, good point.
Okay, right. Well, I think that. Is there anything else in this week's issue that you can download? You can go to www.boxingnewsonline.net and you can follow the on-screen instructions. Go to the App Store, you'll find it. Is there anything else in the issue this week? I quite enjoyed this from Elliot Wurz, always one of the best boxing writers in the country at the moment, I think. Really nice piece with Sakio Bika. What did you think of that one?
Yeah, it was good. It was good to find out a lot more about Bika and where he comes from and his journey. I mean, he didn't win a world title until his fourth opportunity at it. So although it's kind of an unsung hero story, he has also had quite a lot of opportunities. So it's an interesting contrast in that respect. And yeah, he's looking at some of the British fighters in the future, Froch, Groves, DeGale. So I think that's quite interesting as well. Yeah,
definitely. And something else that just reminded me actually, we kind of put it out there to the readers. James DeGale against Sakio Bika, who wins? That's an interesting fight, isn't it? That's a winnable one for DeGale, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Not one I'd want to watch, I've got to be honest. Sakio's a right roughhouse, and DeGale likes to be on his toes and slick. I think DeGale would outbox him, yeah, but he'd be pressured and he'd be on those ropes quite a lot, so I'm glad his knees are all right.
That's very true. Okay, right, that brings us to the end. I'll be sunning myself this time next week, so I'm not sure who the dream team will be next week, but I think you'll be involved with it somewhere along the lines. But thanks
Public demand.
Thanks for getting involved this week, and thanks everybody for listening, and we'll be speaking to you next week.